My name is Chloe, and I considered my family to be rather typical until last year. At the age of 32, I am employed at North Star Construction as a sales manager. I've always been the responsible one, the one who complied with all regulations, achieved academic success, and obtained a steady employment. Melissa, my 36-year-old elder sister, is quite different from me. After graduating from college, she married Brad, her high school boyfriend, and became a full-time mother to their 2 boys, Tyler and Noah, who are now 10 and 12 years old. Melissa contacted me that day, sobbing so much that I could not hear her. Brad had left her for his coworker, Jennifer, after packing his luggage. Suddenly, 15 years of marriage were ended. He said he hasn't been happy for years, Chloe, she lamented over the phone. How could he do this to me and the boys? When I arrived to her place that evening, I saw her sitting on the kitchen floor with tissues all around her. Confused and distraught, the lads were confined to their rooms. What am I going to do? Melissa's red and swollen eyes begged. Since before Tyler was born, I have not had a job. All of the expenses were covered by Brad. I said, we'll figure it out, but at the time I didn't know what that meant. As it happens, Brad had no desire to solve any problems. Until Melissa sued him, he would not pay child support, and even then, it was hardly enough to buy groceries. The lovely suburban home where they had resided, since Brad had owned it prior to marriage, he took it. I said, I can help you find an apartment, as I assisted her with packing one day. Melissa started crying every few minutes, so it was fortunate that the boys were with our parents. How can I make my rent payment? Chloe, I don't have any money. I then made the offer that would make all the difference. I can cover it until you get on your feet. My parents also offered help. Mom, a former elementary school teacher, and Dad, a retired accountant, jumped right in. When Melissa began working part-time at a local boutique, they would bring up the boys from school, assist with schoolwork, and see to it that they had food. Things appeared to be under control for the first several months. I would send Melissa money for rent and sometimes help her with other bills. I made decent money at North Star, drove a dependable Honda Accord, and lived alone in a small 2-bedroom apartment. I could take care of supporting my sister during a difficult time. However, as the weeks stretched into months, a shift occurred. Melissa seems to become more victimized rather than more independent. She adopted the phrase, "Brad ruined my life," as her daily motto. I planned everything out. Until the boys left for college, I was going to be a stay-at-home mother. Look at me now. I made an effort to show empathy. Talking to someone could be beneficial. I could cover the cost of a therapy. The look she gave me could have frozen fire. I don't need someone to tell me how to feel, Chloe. I need money to live. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to work at that store? The manager is 10 years younger than me. Conversations like this became routine. If I mentioned I was busy, she'd call our parents, who'd listen and validate her anger for hours. Mom would call me afterward. Your sister is really struggling, honey. She needs us all to be there for her. By the 6-month mark, the financial strain was becoming noticeable. It wasn't just rent anymore. It was the boys need new soccer cleats, the refrigerator is making weird noises, and Tyler's math grades are slipping. He needs a tutor. Each request seemed reasonable on its own. How could I say no to my nephews needing school supplies or winter coats? But one night, sitting at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet open on my laptop, I added it all up. I nearly choked on my wine when I saw the total. I was spending almost a third of my monthly income on Melissa and her kids. The next Sunday dinner at my parents' house, I decided to bring it up. We were all there, Mom and Dad, Melissa, the boys, and me. Mom had made her famous pot roast, and everyone was in a good mood. It seemed like the perfect time for a difficult conversation. So I've been thinking, I said carefully after we'd finished eating. It's been almost a year since the divorce. I'm happy to help with rent, but some of the extra expenses are adding up. Maybe it's time to look for a full-time position. The silence that followed was deafening. "Are you saying you're tired of helping me?" Melissa's voice was dangerously quiet. "Do you have any idea what I'm going through?" "The boys are in school all day," I pointed out, gesturing to my nephews, "and Mom and Dad help with pickup. There are jobs with regular business hours that—" "I can't believe you." Melissa stood up so fast her chair tipped over. "I'm still recovering from Brad destroying our family, and now you're attacking me too." "I'm not attacking you, I'm just—" "Come on, boys, we're leaving." She grabbed her purse and motioned to Tyler and Noah, who reluctantly got up, mumbling goodbye to our parents. The front door slammed so hard the family photos on the wall rattled. I looked at my parents, expecting at least some understanding. Instead, Dad frowned deeply while Mom shook her head. "How could you be so selfish, Chloe?" Mom asked. "Your sister is a single mother of 2 boys, and you're single with no children. You don't need as much money as she does." I stared at them in disbelief. "So I should just bankroll her indefinitely. That's what being a good sister means. It means not being greedy when your family needs you," Mom said firmly. I realized arguing was pointless. These were the people who had taught me family comes first, but apparently that only applied when I was the one giving. "I should go," I said, standing up. "Thanks for dinner." As I drove home that night, I felt completely alone for the first time in my life. A week after the disastrous family dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Melissa. "Need $500 for boys' clothes. They've outgrown everything and look terrible. Please send today." No hello, no acknowledgement of our argument, not even a please, until it was tacked on as an afterthought. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. Part of me wanted to refuse, to finally set a boundary. But then I thought about Tyler and Noah. It wasn't their fault their mom was acting this way. I sighed heavily and transferred the money. Melissa's only response was a thumbs-up emoji. Work became my refuge. At North Star Construction, I was respected. My opinions mattered. When I closed deals, people congratulated me instead of asking for more. I threw myself into a particularly challenging project, securing a contract for a new office complex downtown. The client was notoriously difficult, but I spent weeks preparing the perfect pitch. "You knocked it out of the park, Chloe," my boss said after we signed the contract. "This commission is going to be substantial." When the bonus hit my account, I felt a rush of excitement I hadn't experienced in months. For once, I decided to do something for myself instead of tucking it away for Melissa's next emergency. I'd been driving my Honda Accord for 7 years. While it was reliable, I'd always dreamed of something a little nicer. The following Saturday, I visited 3 dealerships and test drove half a dozen cars. By the end of the day, I was the proud owner of a silver Audi A4, not the most extravagant car on the lot, but definitely a step up from my Honda. As I drove it home, I felt proud of myself. This was the result of my hard work, my dedication. Then I thought about Melissa. Her car was a 15-year-old Toyota with over 200,000 miles on it. She complained about it constantly, how it made strange noises, how the air conditioning barely worked, how embarrassed the boys were to be seen in it. My perfectly good Honda would be a massive upgrade for her. The next family dinner came around quickly. I deliberately drove the Honda, planning to surprise Melissa. When I arrived at my parents' house, I heard her voice before I even opened the door. And then Jenny had the nerve to ask me to cover her shift on Saturday. I told her I have children, you know. I can't just drop everything because you want to go to a concert. And she said other single moms at work managed just fine. Can you believe that? My parents were nodding sympathetically as I walked in. Mom patted Melissa's hand. "Some people just don't understand how hard you have it, dear." I bit my tongue and greeted everyone. Throughout dinner, Melissa dominated the conversation with complaints about her job, her co-workers, and of course, Brad. I waited patiently for a lull in the conversation. Finally, as Mom served dessert, I saw my opportunity. I pulled the Honda keys from my pocket and slid them across the table to Melissa. "I have something for you," I said, feeling genuinely excited. "I bought a new car yesterday and I want you to have my Honda. It's in great shape, has low mileage, and would be perfect for taking the boys to school and activities." Instead of the smile I expected, Melissa's eyes narrowed. She picked up the keys like they were contaminated. "What did you get?" "An Audi," I answered, my excitement deflating. "Nothing fancy, just an A4. The silence that followed was excruciating. My parents exchanged glances with Melissa, a whole conversation happening without words. "An Audi," Melissa repeated, dropping the keys onto the table with a clatter. "Well, I can barely afford groceries. You're out buying luxury cars?" "It's not a luxury car," I defended, "and I'm giving you my Honda. It's worth at least $10,000. Melissa stood up abruptly, kicking the keys across the floor. "I don't want your hand-me-downs. If you had any real concern for me and the boys, you would have given us the new car." I was stunned. "You expect me to give you a brand new Audi?" "Why not? What do you need it for? To impress clients? To feel important? I'm struggling to keep my children clothed and fed." I looked at my parents, silently pleading for them to intervene, to point out how unreasonable she was being. Instead, Dad cleared his throat and said, "Chloe, maybe you should have consulted us before making such a large purchase." I repeated, not believing what I was hearing. Mom nodded. "If you have enough money for a new Audi, perhaps that money could have been better spent helping your sister get back on her feet. But since you've already bought a new car, give it to Melissa." Something inside me snapped. I slammed my hand on the table, making everyone jump. The dessert plates rattled, and Tyler's glass of milk spilled. "It's my money," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "I worked for it. I am not obligated to support you indefinitely, Melissa. I helped you because I love you, but this is ridiculous. If my Honda isn't good enough for you, then you get nothing." I stood up, walked over to where the keys had landed, and picked them up. "Chloe, don't be dramatic," Mom started, but I cut her off. "No, I'm done. I'm not paying for the apartment anymore. I'm not sending you money for clothes or tutors or whatever else you decide you need. Figure it out yourself." As I drove home in my Honda, my reliable paid-for Honda that apparently wasn't good enough for my sister, my phone exploded with texts and calls. I ignored them all. That night, I listed my old Honda for sale online. 3 days later, I accepted an offer slightly below what I'd hoped for, but I didn't care. I just wanted it gone. As I handed over the keys to the new owner, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sadness. I'd driven that car for years without issue, but in the end, it had brought me nothing but grief. A week passed, then another. I drove my new Audi to work, went about my business, and tried to ignore the gnawing guilt that my family's words had planted. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should have given Melissa the new car. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. No. I shook my head every time these thoughts crept in. I'd already done more than enough. Then came the message I'd been expecting. "Rent is due tomorrow. Please transfer the money." No greeting, no acknowledgement of our fight, just a demand. For the first time, I replied with a simple no. The response was immediate. My phone rang. I declined the call. It rang again. I declined again. Then came the barrage of texts. "What do you mean no? Are you seriously going to make me and the boys homeless? I can't believe you're doing this to us. Mom and Dad are furious with you." I turned my phone off and went to bed early. The next morning, I woke up to 27 missed calls and over 50 text messages from Melissa and my parents. I deleted them all without reading and got ready for work. This was the first time in my adult life I'd stood up to my family, and despite the anxiety churning in my stomach, it also felt strangely freeing. That evening, The pounding on my apartment door started around 7:00 p.m. I knew exactly who it was. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. Better to get it over with. I opened the door to find Melissa, Mom, and Dad standing there, all with identical expressions of righteous indignation. They filed in, none of them taking the offer to sit down. Mom spoke first. "Chloe, this has gone far enough. Your sister needs to pay her rent tomorrow or she'll be evicted." "That's not my problem anymore," I replied, crossing my arms. "Not your problem." Melissa's voice rose to a shrill pitch. "You promised to help me. You said you'd pay my rent." "I've been paying your rent for nearly a year," I pointed out, "along with clothes for the boys, tutoring, appliances, and everything else you've asked for. I've spent thousands of dollars helping you." "So what? You have the money," Melissa shouted. "You bought a brand new car just last week." "With my money," I shot back, "that I earned. And when I tried to give you my perfectly good Honda, you threw back in my face. You literally threw the keys on the floor because you were flaunting your new car while I was struggling." I took a deep breath. "Melissa, you're not struggling because of me. You're struggling because you refuse to get a full-time job, because you spend all your energy complaining about Brad instead of moving forward, and because you expect everyone else to solve your problems for you." "We're family," Mom said, as if that explained everything. "Family helps each other." "I have helped for a year, but it's never enough, is it? No matter how much I give, you all act like I'm some selfish monster for having anything for myself." "Because you're single with no kids," Melissa snapped. "What do you even need money for?" I stared at her in disbelief. "To live my life, to save for my future, to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Why is that so hard to understand?" "Because you're being selfish." Melissa, Missa, was almost screaming now. "I need that money more than you do." "Then earn it," I said quietly. Like I did. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mom broke the silence. "If you don't help your sister, Chloe, you're not the daughter we raised. We raised you to care about family." "No, you raised me to be Melissa's ATM," I retorted, "and I'm done with it." "Fine," Melissa spat. "Keep your precious money, but don't expect to be part of this family anymore. If being part of this family means being exploited and taken for granted, maybe that's for the best," I replied, surprised by my own calm. "You'll regret this," Melissa hissed as they moved toward the door. "When you're old and alone with nothing but your money, you'll regret choosing it over your family." "I'm not choosing money over family," I said. "I'm choosing self-respect." The door slammed behind them, and I collapsed onto my couch, exhausted but strangely peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe freely. The guilt was still there, but it was overshadowed by the relief of finally setting boundaries. Over the next few weeks, I heard through mutual friends and relatives that Melissa had been forced to move out of her apartment. She and the boys had moved in with our parents, which seemed like the arrangement that should have happened from the start. She was still working part-time at the boutique, and our parents were effectively supporting her, just as they'd expected me to do. According to my cousin Rachel, they were all telling anyone who would listen what a terrible person I was, how I'd abandoned my sister in her time of need, how I cared more about fancy cars than family, how I'd always been the selfish one. A month after our confrontation, Rachel invited me to coffee. "I wanted to check on you," she said. "Your parents are saying some pretty harsh things, and I wanted to hear your side." I told her everything. The year of paying Melissa's rent, the constant demands for more money, the car incident, all of it. Rachel nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've always thought Aunt Karen and Uncle Jim babied Melissa too much. Well, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." That phrase stuck with me. It perfectly described what I'd been doing, burning through my resources, my boundaries, my self-respect, all to keep Melissa comfortable in her victimhood. "Thanks, Rachel," I said. "That means a lot." As I drove home in my Audi, which I now enjoyed without guilt, I realized something important. I wasn't alone after all. My parents and sister might have turned their backs on me, but I still had people in my corner. More importantly, I had finally chosen to stand in my own corner. 6 months passed. Summer turned to fall, and fall gave way to winter. The holidays loomed, and with them came the question of what to do about family gatherings. Would I be invited? Would I want to go if I was? I hadn't spoken to my parents or Melissa since that night in my apartment, though not for lack of trying on their part. About 2 months after our confrontation, the messages started changing tone. No longer angry demands, they became guilt trips. The boys missed their aunt. Mom texted one day, "Tyler asked about you at breakfast. Melissa wrote another time." I didn't respond. I knew what they were doing, using the boys as emotional leverage. It hurt to think about my nephews, to wonder what they'd been told about why Aunt Chloe wasn't around anymore. But I couldn't cave. If I showed any weakness, any willingness to engage, I'd be right back where I started. Work continued to be my salvation. I threw myself into projects, landed new clients, and received another promotion. My bank account was healthier than it had ever been now that I wasn't supporting 2 additional households. I started taking better care of myself, too. I joined a yoga class, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during the Melissa crisis, and even went on a few dates, though nothing serious developed. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first without guilt. In early December, I ran into my nephew Tyler at the mall. He was with a friend, no sign of Melissa or Noah nearby. When he saw me, his eyes widened. He hesitated before approaching. "Aunt Chloe," he said cautiously, as if unsure I'd acknowledge him. "Tyler." I gave him a warm smile. "How are you, buddy?" "I'm okay," he said, shuffling his feet. "We're living with Grandma and Grandpa now. Mom complains a lot. Noah and I share the guest room." I nodded, not wanting to say anything negative about his mother. "And how's school?" "Good. I made the basketball team." A small smile crossed his face. "Coach says I might start next game." "That's fantastic. I'd love to come watch sometime if that's okay with you." His face lit up. "Really? That would be cool. Our next game is Thursday at 4:30. I made a mental note. I'll try to be there. I kept that promise. I sat in the back of the bleachers, watching Tyler play. He was good, lanky and quick, with natural athletic ability. When he scored his first basket, I cheered loudly. His head turned in my direction. The smile he gave me was worth any potential awkwardness with Melissa. After the game, I waited outside, unsure if I should approach. Tyler made the decision for me, jogging over with his gym bag. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. I said I would. I gestured to the parking lot. "Is your mom here?" He shook his head. "Grandma brought me. She's waiting in the car." I followed Tyler to a familiar sit-in where my mother sat in the driver's seat. When she saw me approaching with Tyler, her expression was unreadable. "Hi, Mom," I said simply. When Tyler opened the passenger door, she looked at me for a long moment. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" I ran into Tyler at the mall. He invited me to his game. Mom's eyes grew softer. "He's getting quite good, isn't he?" "He's amazing," I concurred. There was an uneasy quiet. Clearly hoping for some sort of reconciliation, Tyler glanced between us. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" At last I inquired. "Just the 2 of us." She nodded after hesitating. "I'd like that." We decided to get together the next week. I had a ray of optimism as they drove off. Maybe not every bridge was destroyed by fire. At first, coffee with Mom was tense. We skirted the problems, discussing my job, her garden, and the weather. At last, I inhaled deeply and confronted the issue at hand. I murmured, "I miss you and Dad and the lads," However, I am unable to return to the previous state of affairs. Mom gazed into her cup of coffee. Melissa is still struggling. I understand, and I apologize for it. However, I can no longer serve as her safety net. She says you abandoned her. I gave a headshake. I spent over a year assisting her. I purchased clothes for the boys, covered her rent, and covered the cost of tuition. Mom, I tried everything I could, but she wasn't improving. She was becoming increasingly reliant. Mom was silent for a while. To my surprise, she acknowledged that your father and I might have enabled that. We have consistently spoiled her. You were the strong one and she was the weak one, even as a little child. It was the first time either of my parents had ever acknowledged that Melissa had received different treatment. Being the strong one doesn't mean I have to carry everyone else. No, Mom said. It doesn't, and maybe we had high expectations of you. Although it wasn't a complete apology, it was a beginning. To attempt to patch things up, Melissa, Dad, Mom, and I decided to eat dinner together. Though anxious, I had hope. There was never a supper. Melissa informed Mom that she would go out to supper if I was present the evening before our planned reconciliation. The fact that I had abandoned her and the boys still infuriated her. She was not prepared to pardon me. I ate supper with my folks alone instead. Even though it was awkward and stiff at times, we were able to get to a tenuous understanding. I committed to be more present at family get-togethers whenever I could, and they agreed to cease pressing me to provide Melissa with financial assistance. Dad told me as I was leaving that she'll come around eventually. She just needs more time. Perhaps she would. Perhaps she wouldn't. In any case, I knew I was oak. My months-long burden of guilt had subsided. I had done nothing wrong by refusing to be taken advantage of and by establishing boundaries. I considered how much had changed in a year as I made my way home that evening. My family's steadfast backing was gone, but I had earned something more worthwhile, self-respect. I had discovered that assisting others shouldn't come at the price of my own health. Financial assistance shouldn't be a prerequisite for that love, and that you may have a great affection for someone and still refuse their requests.